إيهود باراك هو الأكثر تتويجاً بالأوسمة العسكرية في إسرائيل، وكان قائداً للجيش في حربي 1967 و 1973، وقد اشتهر بشكل خاص كقائد لوحدات القوات الخاصة التي قامت بغارات الكوماندوز وبعض عمليات القتل المستهدفة المثيرة للجدل. شغل منصب رئيس وزراء إسرائيل من 1999 إلى 2001.
Mr. Ehud Barak, former Prime Minister of Israel, thank you so much indeed for giving us in المجلة this interview, and I wish that you had a good Pasach or Passover, a short mental break for you.
Thank you.
Right, so it's hopefully it will be a very in-depth conversation with you. To pick up your thoughts, actually, your strategic thoughts on a few or a number of questions that I have in mind. So let's start with this question. Do you think that Israel's response or military response to the October the 7th attacks by Hamas sends a strong message of deterrence to anyone, actually, that Israel won't hesitate to do anything, even full destruction of infrastructure, of houses, killing of civilians, as we have been witnessing in Gaza Strip, to deter any future attacks?
I think that the Hamas for sure suffered a major blow, but it suffered it after a major unprecedented achievement, namely it was the worst blunder in the history of Israel since its establishment. Think of it, it's like having in Saudi Arabia some neighbor, let's say Yemen, some force of barbarians enter the kingdom and slaughtering, if I compare the number, some 4,000 men, women, children, them massacring, slaughtering, mutilating, raping, whatever. That was something that you cannot very easily overcome. It create a compelling imperative to make sure that Hamas will not be able to reign over the Gaza Strip and cannot threaten Israel anymore. And that objective has not been achieved, and it's not very close. So in this regard, it's not sure that even the major blow that Hamas has suffered really change enough the threat, and it's now clear that there is still work to be done, and under situation which is not very simple for Israel.
Regarding Rafah, as we are speaking to each other, there was news that Israel is preparing, apparently, to carry out a military operation in Rafah by starting asking the residents in the eastern part of Rafah to evacuate. Do you think, and from your extensive military background as one of the most, if not the most, decorated Israeli general, do you think that the incumbent government of Benjamin Netanyahu, or the Israeli government from a wider perspective, in terms of political and strategic thinking, do you think that it is really after just defeating 2 or 3 battalions of Hamas in Rafah, or there is more than this that meets the eye?
I think that most urgent now for Israel is to release the hostages. More urgent and important now to anything else, because even if Israel decides to go into Rafah, just to evacuate the people from Rafah itself, if we don't mean just to get to Abashan al-Kabir or Abashan al-Zrir, which are the neighboring small cities. If we really mean Rafah, it might take several weeks to evacuate the refugees, and it might take several months to bring about some results there. By then, the hostages will be already dead. So it's not symmetric. You know, to the best of my judgment, the 22nd or 23rd Battalion of Hamas can wait for another period before it's kind of destroyed. But the hostages will not be alive. So there is a logic, a clean mind, the strategic thinking will lead you to the conclusion, first of all, release the hostages. It goes together with some 3 months or 4 months of ceasefire. This is a good opportunity to calm down the north as well, the struggle against Hezbollah, to bring back the people. There are refugees within Israel. You know, the whole strip of villages around the cities around the Gaza Strip are empty now. The whole strip of the border along the Lebanese border is empty, the Israeli side. So we have to bring them back. Then we will have some time to rearm the army, to refresh certain things. And if we decide at that time that something should be continued about Hamas, we'll have to discuss it by then. So I think that the whole order of priority is bad. But how did we come to this situation? We came to this situation because the real threat on Hamas is not another military operation in Rafah. The real threat on Hamas is that Israel will hand over the Gaza Strip to some other force or power that will take over the place, and not Hamas. And Hamas will be unable to shoot at them. And that's the real threat. And this had to be discussed and prepared half a year ago. And I don't say it in retroactive. I said it in real time 5 and 6 months ago. We should look at the whole picture and realize that the right way is not to listen to the very extremists in our government. There are some messianic extremists that probably coerce Bibi Netnyahu to some of these actions. But basically, we have an opportunity. The Americans propose to establish a moderate axis of Israel, the Sunnite moderate leaders of the region, backed by America, to deploy against both extremists like Hezbollah, the Iranian-led kind of militias in Iraq, like the Syrians, the axis of moderate backed by America to face axis of rogue states and rogue entities backed by Iran and indirectly by Russia. This is great opportunity, and there is even a proposed trilateral deal with the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. I think that this was the trajectory that had to be chosen. Under this trajectory, one of the first things was to organize probably Egyptian-led inter-Arab force made of Egyptian, Jordanian, probably Emirati, who will get, with American backing and probably a majority resolution in the Arab League, to make sure that Israel does not hold the Gaza for the long term, and certain legitimate authority will come there, which probably is the Palestinian Authority, because there is no other force which is legitimate. You cannot send the Swedish, Norwegians, or South Africans. It should be Palestinians at the end. So temporarily, a kind of inter-Arab force, and later on, with certain milestones, the improved Palestinian Authority. This is the real threat to Sinwar. But even now, under much worse situation, more complicated situation, it's still the only viable option. We have to say yes, but to the Americans, probably a big but, because we have many reservations, but basically yes to the Americans and the moderate leaders of the Middle East, and big no to Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, the two messianic racist ministers in our government.
But perhaps the current war cabinet, not just Benjamin Netanyahu, but Gantz, Gallant, and other prominent ministers. Perhaps they have in mind a more strategic goal, to my way of thinking, which is redrawing the political and the future political boundaries or administrative boundaries of the Gaza Strip, to have some parts of Gaza or the Strip as a buffer zone or a no man's land. This is to my way of thinking.
This should be part of the negotiation when it comes to the details. Israeli people and even military officers think that one of the reasons that Hamas succeeded in doing it is because it can start the operation on the fence, which is mainly sometimes few hundred meters from civilians sleeping at their beds at night. And it's very complicated to defend. So kind of a military conclusion is probably we need to have a buffer zone. There is, if you take 2 kilometers buffer zone all along the perimeter, it's probably 30% of the area of the Gaza Strip. So it's probably should be something limited but very effective. Or someone has to raise other ideas, but it's clear Israel has a compelling imperative to make sure that our civilians can go to sleep in their bed at night, not expecting the possibility that they will walk up by barbarian terrorists that aimed at killing them, killing mothers in front of their babies, or the other way around, or slaughtering people, mutilating, raping, whatever. We are not ready to see it anymore. So Israel will do whatever it takes. If there is other solution, let's think about it. Israel should be ready to consider any kind of solution that minimize the hardship for others, but protect the safety of Israelis in their bed.
You were very much involved in the peace process a long time ago when you succeeded Ishaq Rabin. Today, do you think that the peace process is no longer relevant? I mean, there's no peace and there's no process.
It depends. You have to understand that the Israeli public, the Israeli collective psyche now is one of strong pain, a lot of anger, rage, frustration. Some people feel humiliation and calls for revenge. And we are an open society. So now even moderate political leaders do not mention the word peace, do not mention the word Palestinian state, do not mention even a two-state solution. It doesn't mean that it's dead. It's not dead. It means that they listen to the pulse of their own public, which is too highly alerted now, and we can understand. I can understand it. It's human response. It would happen to you personally if your wife or baby would be slaughtered in front of your eyes. You want to listen about more love between people and hugging each other. It takes time. This response of the Israeli public, which is humane and natural, and I understand it, is not a good recipe for statesmanship or for strategic decisions, but it will take time. I don't believe that it's dead. I know that there is no other alternative in the long term. Israel was quite good in the action of killing mosquitoes. But now we have to invest more thinking about how to drain the swamp where the mosquitoes are going. It is, namely, how to deal with the root causes of the whole happen. I don't buy the idea that there are no innocent people in Gaza and everyone wants to slaughter us. I don't pretend to control the dreams of people. Probably some people, even neighbors of us, dream that we will disappear, but we are not going to disappear. We are here to stay, and we will stay there for a long time. We'll make sure that we are strong enough that no one can push us out of here. But that doesn't mean that we have to not to see the potential for relaxation of the conflict. And at the heart of it, it's the Palestinian issue. You know, we're talking about normalization with Saudi Arabia. We talked about the normalization with Abraham Accord members. And in Israel, some people put it under the term peace. And I say it's not really a peace. We never had any war with the Emiratis or with the Moroccans or with the Sudanese, or we never had a war with them. We never had a war with Saudi Arabia. So it's normalization of relationship, and with the neighbors with whom we had wars, like Egypt. I remember bitter wars with Israel. I remember bitter wars with Jordan. We have peace with them. Unfortunately, we don't have peace with Syria and Lebanon yet. But I am confident that the time will come when there will be peace in the Middle East. It might take 5, 15, 50 years, I don't know. It will come. And we will find ourselves having to live side by side with Israel. And people hate to hear it, but there is a compelling need to disengage from the Palestinians. And the only solution is that they have their neighboring state. It should be demilitarized, but should be viable state that reflects the needs of the Palestinian people without threatening the existence of Israel and the security of Israel.
Do you think that it is important for the policy makers in Israel in general today, and after the October the 7th attacks and the Israeli response and the declaration of war, do you think that it is very important for the policy makers to bear in mind and to care about how Israel as a state is perceived and captured or imagined today in the Arab streets?
It's important. It was important before the war. It's important during the war. It's even more important after a war. It's important. But there is a limit, you know, at the height of a clash, as a result of 7th of October. We cannot ignore what happened on 7th of October. We do not want to ignore it, and we cannot afford leaving it kind of unresponded. So we're now in the middle of response to it. I can think of better ways to do it militarily or professionally, but it's not the time and the forum to discuss that. That's complaint I have probably against some of our people. But basically, I agree that Israel should make clear and make it clear beyond any doubt, Hamas cannot reign over the Gaza Strip, and Hamas cannot ever threaten Israel the way it did before. And Israel will do whatever it takes to bring it happen. But it could happen through a continued military effort that will take more lives on both sides, but it can be reached a point of clarity through understanding of the needed steps. For example, as I mentioned, if we go together with the Americans and other neighbors and establish a multi-Arab national force. I mentioned multi-Arab because they can afford, Hamas can afford hitting Israelis, even if there is only several groups of Hamas with light weapons. They can still try to kill Israel. They would not dare to shoot at Egyptian force because Egypt holds the oxygen of the Gaza Strip. They would not dare to shoot at Arab force that came under majority resolution of the Arab League. They might try to send some of their people, some Islamists, into the bureaucracy, into probably the government that will reign over the area, but not those who involved in terror, and they cannot push out Arab neighbors. Kind of assistance, basically assistance for their own population to come on their feet once again to reconstruct the infrastructure. There's a lot of damage there, and there's a lot of work to be done. And Hamas cannot do it alone. And that's, I think, challenge not just to Israel, not just to the United States. It's a challenge to the Arab neighbors as well. And I think that it promotes the understanding between us and other neighbors. Of course, not with the Hamas.
Obviously, Israel has the military advantage in its current war with Hamas. So, as the powerful party in this conflict, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, I mean, what would Israel, if it is negotiating a peace deal today, would give the Palestinians, would offer the Palestinians in terms of compromises?
Look, I think that to discuss it now, while we are speaking in May 24, just less than 1 year after this terrible barbarian massacre, it's not productive to discuss it right now. The terms are quite clear. You can go backward into what was on the table at the Camp David when I met with Arafat, what was on the table when Ehud Olmert, who followed me, discussed with Abu Mazen, what was before I took power, even between Netnyahu and Arafat in Y Plantation with Clinton. What was later on when Sharon, out of all people, the prime minister, he decided that it doesn't make sense to stay in Gaza Strip. And he was the one who ordered to dismantle settlements and to take back to Israel synagogues, even cemeteries. Buried people were moved back into Israel. And in order to make clear that it doesn't mean just the Gaza Strip, he ordered the evacuation of 3 or 4 small Israeli settlements around Jenin at the northern part of the West Bank. So when you think of all these events, you understand that Israelis, when they are led by a self-confident government that feels strong and secure, there is readiness to discuss things. We never reached a point of meeting. And people sometimes ask me, how come you were so close? So how can't you bridge over the gaps? I tell them, you know, in order to measure the magnitude of a gap, you have to multiply its width by its depth. Sometimes it looks very close, but there are deep differences. The real problem with Arafat, and later on with Abu Mazen, but mainly Arafat, Abu Mazen was much better, that even when we proposed, myself and Clinton proposed, we put on the table far-reaching proposal that basically covered probably metaphorically 90+% of whatever he can think of. And unlike the urban legend, we never dictated, we never told him take it or leave it. We never threatened him. I told him in front of Clinton, you can have reservation from any paragraph or from all the paragraphs. Write down your reference. The only thing we want to do is to accept this document as a basis for further negotiations. And Arafat rejected it and turned deliberately to terror. We know it from intelligence material, deliberately to terror. So that's why both Clinton and myself until now say that unfortunately we couldn't bridge the gap because Arafat was not there in his mind. And I cannot penetrate his soul. Probably he thought of himself as a national leader that cannot dive now into social reform, social security, education, sewage, education. So probably, I don't know. Probably he thought that, oh, it's not good to achieve an agreement in negotiations because nations are born in blood, not in air-conditioned negotiation. I cannot say, but I know that if he would be ready to take decisions, the kind of decision that Israeli leaders took in the past, even Ben-Gurion in 47, you know, when the United Nations decided on making 2 states, Arab state and Jewish state, in what was Palestine under the British mandate, Ben-Gurion on Israel's behalf accepted it. it was terrible Israel, 3 cantons hardly connected without Jerusalem, without even a road to Jerusalem. He accepted it. And the Palestinians rejected it and called upon Arab neighboring countries to attack young Israel before it can stand on its feet. And I remember it. I was 6 years old, but I was very aware of what happens around. So we survived this war. So we cannot be apologetic for being survived. We all know what would have happened if we were defeated. And since then, we have one principle. We have to be strong enough to reject any threat. And we have always to be open. The need, the right moment and opportunities to relaxate the conflict and go to peace. And I'm confident that even if we have to wait 15 years or 50 years, the moment there will be relaxation of the conflict, people won't be able to understand why the hell it took so long, why it did so many people to be buried on both sides. Why couldn't we do it earlier?
Yeah, I mean, it took Israel just 6 days to annex and capture the West Bank and then occupy the West Bank. But now we are talking about 57 years of occupation. Isn't that complicated, Mr. Barak? Is that complicated? The occupation is the source of all the troubles and the problems that we have been witnessing over the past decades?
No, look, we took over the West Bank and Gaza Strip as a result of the conflict. We did not initiate it. It was a response to a direct threat on Israel at that time. And since then, we have peace agreement with Egypt, which is a little bit cold, but it's strategic. It is for 45 years now. We have for 30 years peace with Jordan. My generation, as a young officer, I never believed we'd have a peace with either of them. And we have now. Close your eyes and think how much more complicated the situation of Israel would have been if we did not have now peace with Egypt and with Jordan. So for me, it's clear. It takes too long, probably, but it's for historians to share the responsibility. Palestinians have heavy responsibility. We are not free of making mistakes along the way. And there were ups and downs in the mood in the Arab world about it. You know, I can but praise the Saudis some 22 years ago already initiated a proposal that had not yet been approached in practical terms to try to make it a basis. There is the Arab League. So it's not all dark picture, and there are other developments. I can once again mention what happens in the recent years under His Highness Crown Prince MBS. Is something that's phenomenal. The world is following with growing appreciation of the daring nature of the ready to take political risk, other risks, in order to make things better for the future, for the young generation, for the region as a whole. And there are similar development in other corners of the Arab world. And there is certain forces in Israel that pushes or drags us toward more animosity, and there are those who are trying to push to more rational observation, trying to always. I used to say that we have always to have the left hand trying to open doors to see whether we can have some peace negotiations, and the pointing finger of the right hand close to the trigger, ready to pull it because we are in the middle. It's a tough neighborhood. And I think that we all together, from all peoples, have to work toward openness, toward collaboration, toward tolerance to each other. We don't have to be the same, but you have to understand that you have the right to be different from me, or Saudi Arabia has a right to be different from Israel, but still it doesn't, we cannot ignore the opportunities in collaboration. And without giving your principle, without giving our principle, there is a lot of things to do together.
You talked about the Oslo agreements and your role in trying or attempting to make peace with the Palestinians. But do you think that the Oslo agreements, to start with, were a fair deal to the Palestinians, or they were a trick? I mean, just to explain myself here, I mean, reading the Oslo agreements, Israel divided the West Bank into categories, A, B, C, and maintaining the security control over the Palestinians.
It's in the eye of the beholder. There is no objective measurement. And because of this observation, the people who ran it from both sides were aware of the need to shape it in phases, that each phase make the situation somewhat closer and enable both sides to realize the advantages and the disadvantages that are turned to disappear if it's executed properly. And always there were forces, political forces in Israel, probably even terror forces on the Palestinian side who try to torpedo. And even the events of 7 October, I have no illusions. It's a success of the Hamas in its historic debate with the Palestinian Authority. Is the right way to negotiate with Israel or try to use the weapons and it's a major achievement for Hamas. I'm worried that Sinwar is perceived as a kind of hero in the minds of many young people in all around the Arab world, the Muslim world. And that's another reason when we have to make it clear that he has to lose. He cannot continue to be the power in Gaza. He cannot be able to strengthen Israel anymore. So that makes a common. I think that even a neighboring government where there is a strong Islamist movement, they of course have to accept the fact that there is Islamic movement. It's about ideas. You cannot erase it for the minds of people. But when it comes to an Islamist force that hold weapons and take responsibility to try massacre other people, I don't think that it's healthy for the Arab societies as well. So we are not in a position to preach to them or to tell them. It's up to every country has to make up its mind. But there is a struggle because between extremism and moderation all around the region, also in Israel and all around the world. And we have to hope that reasonable people, leaders who see reality as it is and see not just the obstacles, but also the opportunities, that they will reign over the policy rather than those messianic people on all corners of the world who hear voices from heaven telling them what to do and ignore the realities of the ground and go with their heads into the wall to accomplish certain order that they believe that they got from heaven. That's not a good way to run modern, advanced human societies.
Right, but the reality on the ground now in the West Bank, which is the Palestinians, which the Palestinians want to be their part of the future state alongside the Gaza Strip. The reality on the ground indicates that the territory is dwindling, is shrinking, and that's what I meant when I asked you about dividing the West Bank into categories. And you have many settlements now and illegal outposts. What should Israel, from a strategic point of view, do with the Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank?
Once again, I think that this subject as well is it's not the right timing to discuss it in details. But once again, I propose to look into the past and see what was the table when we discussed it. Basically, Israel major interest in security. We should have the majority of settlements and within the future border of Israel. We have to delineate a line when the time comes to make peace or to disengage from the Palestinians, which will have most of the settlers and all the strategic security needs of Israel. At the same time, allow the west of the area becoming a viable, independent, viable, however demilitarized Palestinian state. And that's, you know, in the previous discussions, there were disputes whether it should be 70% of the West Bank or 90+% of the West Bank, because there are those even in Israel who argue that within few percentage of the territory in the West Bank, we can have these 80% of the settlers and all these strategic needs. And some even raise the idea that Israel can exchange certain areas, probably around the southern part of the West Bank, or even around Gaza somewhere. There are more than one idea. You know, it was usually Arafat used to always tell us, if there is a will, there is a way. So it's a good saying. He never followed it when they come to the details, or probably he didn't have the will, but there is when the two sides are genuinely ready to take decision, because always there are decisions, always there are compromises. You know, I used to tell Arafat in front of Clinton, the hardest decision that you will have to make is vis-a-vis your people. It's not vis-a-vis me. And the hardest, toughest decision I will have to make will be vis-a-vis my people, not vis-a-vis you. And you know, the conflict won't be solved in heaven. It has to be solved on the ground. And I told him, look, we are the people who happen to be there. We have a responsibility to try to solve it. If we fail, we will pass it to our successors. And at the end, there will be an agreement, and no one will be able to explain. The only thing that will grow will be the size of the burial sites of the graves.
Right.
And that's not a reason, not a good strategy.
You mentioned the Islamist thinking and ideology and the radicals versus the moderates. And I remember now, 50 years ago, you were in charge of one of the boldest assassination operations carried out by the Israeli army and Israel against Palestinian leaders, Kamal Adwan and other Palestinian leaders from the Palestinian Liberation Organization. My question now is, do you think that you could have, or Israel could have, spared the lives of moderate potential Palestinian negotiators like Kamal Adwan, for instance, who was then regarded as deputy of Arafat, to make peace with them in the future? So this targeted assassination policy, it seems to me that from an international law perspective, it could be illegal, but also from a strategic and political thinking, it's backfired. It backfired on Israel, because if you keep eliminating Palestinian figures from Fatah and from Hamas, who are going to negotiate with from the other side?
You know, a war between two states, or sometimes a state and a national movement, especially when it turns to terror, becomes complicated. And there are some tough decisions to make and some missions to be executed. When we attacked these three people, we were convinced that they were part. It was not revenge for what happened in the Munich Olympic. It was an attempt to block the possibility that such event will repeat itself. It's more to preempt the future attacks. And the guys, one of them were Abu Yusuf al-Najjar. He was responsible for operations for Black September in the West Bank. One was Kamal Adwan, Kamal Nasser, and there was certain debate among the intelligence people, and there was a decision to try to eliminate all of them, and we succeeded in the operation. But every case, I since then became head of the armed forces and the Minister of Defense for many years, Prime Minister. We always have to think several times, not to decide. It's not easy decision. You have to consider whether it's justified, whether the potential value is not overwhelmed by the damage that it might cause. And I don't think that there is anyone who thinks that by just killing individuals we can change the history. Usually it's not the case. It probably would be the case against Hitler, or probably some might say against Stalin or against Saddam Hussein, but not about normally your enemies. But people in Israel really say, why the hell we didn't use previous operation to kill Sinwar? Look what he caused us when we allowed him. And on the other hand, we know that sometime, I was the one who decided, ordered, or recommended to kill the guy who led the Hezbollah before Nasrallah came, Mousawi. So we killed Mousawi and we got Nasrallah. It's not clear whether it's better or worse. So I think that you cannot totally exclude it, but it's a responsibility of whoever is possible in position to make such decision, to think carefully about what he's doing. So, and you are right in the observation that the same people who run in the history of every nation, who fought for its kind of fulfillment of its national dreams, there were people who were active and then became major, not just peacemaker, but the major political leaders of legitimate entities. So we have to think.
Because we have just 2 minutes, I just want to ask you 2 more questions. So do you regret killing or assassinating Kamal Adwan, who was could have been probably a negotiating partner?
I do not regret. I never hated people. I never hated any Palestinians that I killed from close at this time. I never hated the Egyptian soldiers who killed my best friend just besides me during war, or the Jordanians or the Syrians that we fought. I never look backward in this regard, but I am fully aware of the need of any kind of decision, especially those who are aimed at certain individual, to be thought over once and again before execution. It doesn't mean that we can never do it, or we can put handcuffs on ourselves, because those people are really the generators of loss of life. We have responsibility to protect, defend our people. So if the major consideration should be to what extent the target is what we call a ticking bomb. That if you leave it today, at a certain point, probably not next week, probably next year, it will cause much more damage that will make you unable to answer the parents or the spouse of a fallen officer, soldier, or civilian. Why the hell didn't you eliminate him when you could have done it?
Very briefly, sir, and in 30 seconds, do you think a war or a half war is inevitable with Hezbollah?
No, I don't think that it's inevitable. I think that an effort is done to somehow connect it to possibility of a long ceasefire or end of war in the south. And I appreciate the effort are done by the Americans, by the French, probably even by some Saudis that you don't know, to make it happen. And but when I am asked what's the probability, that it will deteriorate into full-scale clash with the Hezbollah. I say probably neither side is interested. I don't think that we need it. I don't think that Hezbollah needs it. Probably the Iranians, but I'm not sure even about that. But they feel committed to fight as long as there is fighting in the south. And I tell people it's 50-50. And I add, it's not 50-50 because I know something that you don't know that makes me assess that it's 50-50. No, it's because there are only two possibilities. Either there will be a full-scale clash or there won't be a full-scale clash, and I don't know. So the only possible answer is 50-50. I hope it won't happen.
Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel, thank you so much indeed for this interview.
Thank you.